We are following developing news in Sonoma County where a brush fire is forcing mandatory evacuations.
Called the Point Fire, and the smoke is pouring south from where it started near Healdsburg in Sonoma County.
The fire burning near Lake Sonoma, and fire crews say structures have been destroyed with more threatened.
More than 400 of the firefighters are on the front line.
It was pretty shocking. This is the closest of all the fires that we've experienced.
Had there not been defensible space during the Point Fire, it is highly likely more structures, more residents would have burned.
The Point Fire ignited on Father's Day 2024. It was one of the first big wildfires of the season, burning 1,200 acres and destroying 3 residential structures to the south of Lake Sonoma in the Dry Creek Valley, a premium wine-growing region in Sonoma County. In this video, we'll examine the fire and the efforts that firefighters and all first responders made combating the fire, factors that led to its rapid growth, as well as previous proactive measures done several years before that came into play in containing the fire. This is the story of the Point Fire. The dispatch to the fire was initiated at 12:33 p.m. on June 16, 2024. CAL FIRE's initial response included 6 engines, 2 dozers, 2 fire crews, 1 battalion chief, 2 helicopters, and 3 fixed-wing aircraft with additional local government resources also responding. This video here is from the CAL FIRE aircraft departing to the fire from the Sonoma Air Attack Base in Santa Rosa, which sits just 13 miles south of the fire. CAL FIRE Battalion Chief Marshall Turbeville discusses the initial attack on the fire.
The fire started along Stewarts Point and Skaggs Springs Road, so the initial access wasn't difficult. Firefighters were able to access where the fire started working along the edge of the fire with hose lays, using water, putting the edge of the fire out. But as the fire started to burn into the brush and into the trees, embers were created, and those embers landed away from, downwind from the main fire perimeter. And that's what caused the fire to escape the initial firefighters' efforts to contain it, to suppress it.
The alignment of the topography and the north winds launched embers that landed downwind ahead of the firefighters, causing the fire to spread rapidly.
When you look at the topography or look at the vegetation here, it creates what's called an alignment, where there's wind burning with topography. So wind, the movement of air, is funneled down canyons. And that's what you see when you look at the aerial view of this area. The fire burned down a canyon, down to Lake Merlot, created embers, spotted across the Pena Creek drainage, and then became established on the north aspect of Bradford Mountain. All about the wind, with embers, creating spot fires, making it hard for firefighters to stop the edge of the fire.
This video from OES Intel 12 shows the fire on June 16th at 3 p.m. when it was mapped at 121 acres. By 10 p.m. that night, the fire grew to over 1,000 acres.
Fire's kind of slopped over Ridgetop Road to the left, and the fire hung up for the most part on the Ridgetop Road. As we continue down the left flank, the head of the fire, the left shoulder, the head of the fire's run into a couple vineyards and a reservoir out in front of it. Coming back around, and we come back down the right flank, active fire on the right flank, and it does have a vineyard to run into, back down towards the heel, switching to IR. You can see the heat signatures on the left flank head and the right flank with unburned fuel between. End of recording.
It was a challenge containing this fire as it progressed and spread over and around Bradford Mountain and eventually further south to Mountain View Ranch Road. Fire managers shifted tactics from a direct attack on the fire to structured defense.
So as the fire burned from Stewarts Point, Skaggs Springs Road towards West Dry Creek Road, towards Mountain View Ranch Road, firefighters mobilized, augmented response, meaning firefighters from all of Sonoma County, neighboring counties, aircraft from throughout the state responded and focused on defending structures. Structure defense is firefighters driving to a building, normally a residence, and generally being at that building when the fire impinges or approaches that building. So firefighters need to be safe feel safe at the building, and that's based on vegetation, defensible space. It's a law, defensible space, the management of vegetation around buildings, around structures to make them less likely to be ignited. On the point fire, we had residences that had good defensible space. They also had roadside clearance along driveways, private roads, and public roads, all which help firefighters access the structures, feel safe at the structures, and make a stand at the structure. No civilian lives are lost, no firefighter lives were lost. Unfortunately, several buildings burned, and that was more based upon not having enough firefighters combined with how fast the fire spread, and then specifically embers. Embers are one of the primary reasons buildings catch fire.
In the Point Fire, there were 3 single-family residences that were destroyed by the fire, along with 7 other outbuildings destroyed. Turbeville explains that more structures would have been lost in this fire had it not been for the proactive work done by local residents to build a fire-resilient community.
Many times, the number of structures outnumber the number of firefighters responding. So it's very critical to have defensible space, vegetation management around buildings and around structures. Had there not been defensible space during the Point Fire, it is highly likely more structures, more residents would have burned.
21:58 hours, the Point incident, LNU, Sonoma County. Fires mapped at 1,013 acres. Starting at the heel of the fire off Skaggs Springs Road, we're coming up the left flank of the fire. Continuing up the left flank, burning brush, mixed timber. Coming up to the left shoulder now, we're getting close to Mountain Home Ranch Road, and coming up now a little further past the left shoulder, up close to the head now. We're closer to Mountain Home Ranch Road. We do have a spot fire outside of Mountain Home Ranch Road, but has not crossed Dry Creek Road. And we'll zoom in on the spot fire right now. There's a spot fire out approximately 2,500 feet out in front of the main fire. Coming back down the right flank, we got a lot of active fire here. We'll keep coming down the right flank, and we'll just slowly start coming back towards the heel of the fire, switching to IR. As we come back down the right flank, we're going to come over and you'll see the very active spot on the right flank, the most active spot on the right flank next to a reservoir. End of report.
So there was a couple things that happened before this fire occurred, before the Point Fire occurred, that helped firefighters contain it. In 2018, CAL FIRE awarded a grant to the Northern Sonoma County Fire Protection District. That grant was to do roadside vegetation management, a shaded fuel break along Mountain View Ranch Road and several other roads off West Dry Creek. A shaded fuel break treatment is limbing up large trees, keeping trees to maintain shade, and ultimately doing the role of what a natural historical low-intensity wildfire would have done. So a 2018 grant establishes roadside vegetation management. In 2020, the Walbridge Fire occurs. Part of the suppression actions taken during the Walbridge Fire was to create bulldozer line on Bradford Mountain and also bulldozer line off of Stewarts Point Skaggs Springs Road. Following the 2020 Walbridge Fire, residents on Mountain View Ranch Road approached Northern Sonoma County Fire Protection District to do prescribed burning.
You might imagine that the idea of lighting fire in your backyard near your home was a little scary for me and for all of our neighbors. But we spent a lot of time with Marshall to really understand what's the benefits of doing these prescribed burns. We had several neighborhood meetings, we educated all of our neighbors, and we've been able to do 4 prescribed burns here, which I definitely feel is important and helps to mitigate for future fires.
So there was a series of prescribed burns, 10 to 15 acre plots in the fall of 2020 that used the 2018 funded roadside vegetation management, that used the dozer line from the 2020 Walbridge as unit boundaries. So prescribed burning could be done safely. It was also not done during the summer, not during windy conditions. It was done in the fall when the days are shorter, the air was more moist. We're here standing on the edge of the 2024 point fire, which is to my left, behind you, and to my right here is a prescribed burn that was done in the fall of 2020 following the Walbridge Fire. So right here where I'm standing is an old road, goes to a hand line. The point fire was stopped right here. And if you look over here, we have a stand of small redwood trees that burned, and it looks like there's a dozer line here, and then off to the right you see a burned area. And so the point fire from middle of June of 2024, it burns to the boundary of this previous prescribed burn done in the fall of 2022. And it appears to me that the only reason that the 2024 point fire burned into the fall of 2020 prescribed burn was from the radiant heat coming off these redwood trees that were burning. Remember, the wind is coming out of the north, blowing across this abandoned dozer line and depositing embers downwind. And as you look, this is more from radiant heat, from the heat of the redwood trees burning, catches this vegetation on fire, but it doesn't burn with the same intensity, meaning that the trees are not being fully consumed, producing embers that are deposited downwind. So firefighters have it easier here. They're able to cut a little bit of hand line like you see around here, use water, get access, and easier to extinguish and control the fire. It's hard to see from here, but embers also landed in the forested green area farther to the south. Those embers that did land did not get up into the tops of the trees, so you can't see any damaged trees. Firefighters had to hike in, use back pump, use hand tools, use helicopter drops to fully extinguish them. So this demonstrates the effectiveness of prescribed burning, of vegetation management, of consuming the leaves, the timber litter, singeing the bottom limbs of a tree so that a fire does not burn like the 2024 point fire. We want it to burn more like the 2020 prescribed burn. Low intensity, less embers. Firefighters are more effective at suppression. There's less embers landing on structures. And as you can tell, there's less damage to the forest. The forest canopy is intact, nice and green, keeps the shade. So just a comparison here, you can see firsthand between a wildfire under windy conditions and a prescribed burn done under set parameters based on our fire modeling.
I'd say if I look back in the point fire assessment, I think the work that we all did in this neighborhood really contributed to allowing the firefighters to not only do their job, but to protect and save a lot of structures.
The other thing to consider is if the 2024 point fire would have spread more to the west, it would have entered the footprint of the 2020 Walbridge Fire, which, just like it slowed down, less intense, less ember production in the prescribed burning from the fall of 2020, we would have expected less intensity in the 2020 Walbridge burned area. So a grant in 2018 from CAL FIRE, County of Sonoma grant funding for prescribed burning, landowners doing their part for structural ignitability and defensible space, all led to successful, less destructive outcome from the 2024 point fire.
So communication is critical, mitigation and fire defense, not just of your own property, but of those properties' adjacencies, so that we can make sure that we're taking care of those fuels. And then, if possible, these prescribed burns can be helpful, even though they can be a little scary at times.
The point fire burned 1,207 acres. At its peak, there were over 1,700 total personnel from all across California assigned to the point fire response. No firefighter lives were lost. No civilian lives were lost. Although 3 single-family residents were destroyed in the fire, the proactive work by local residents limited destruction and led to positive outcomes during the point fire. CAL FIRE urges residents to act now to prepare, prevent, and minimize the damage of wildfires in California. Visit readyforwildfire.org for expert advice on what you can do to protect your home and family against the threat of wildfire. The cause of the point fire remains under investigation.